Welcome back to our 5th episode of the Life Legacy Podcast. And on this podcast, our goal is to bring on people that will inspire you to upgrade the quality of your lifestyle through their beautiful stories. And today we have someone that has really figured out how to go through life with a very positive perspective while going through some really hard things that she's been able to come out on top and make the best of her situations, and has inspired a lot of people with her wanting that or without you wanting it. And so I want to welcome Jody Hazen to our podcast. And Jody is a very special soul in my life. So very grateful to be able to have this moment. And it's kind of full circle because our first real documentary was done for Jody and her family. And now we're taking it to the podcast. So welcome, Jody.
Yeah, thank you. It was awesome. It was better than I expected, the documentary. So that's why I came back.
Oh, thank you.
It was good.
So today we're going to touch on some really beautiful subjects, some trials, and we are going to dive into kind of what your world was like. Is it 5 or 6 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of tell us what home life was like 5 years ago.
It's interesting because it's a little difficult to go back there because it seems like yesterday and it seems like a lifetime ago. But I mean, now I look back and think we had such a great, simple little life. We were loving life. I had 4 kids, and at that time, I'm trying to think, 5 years ago, 2 of my kids had moved out, and 3 of my kids had moved out. All of my kids had moved out. I'm sorry. 2018, they'd all moved out of our house at that time, but we were all really close and just kind of doing what people do, going to soccer tournaments, going to church. I try now I've said many times, what were we thinking about? I don't wonder what we were thinking about back then. What was my brain doing back then? Because it just seemed simple and fun. Yeah. And, but now I also look back and go, gosh, I wouldn't trade this. I think sometimes pain has to crack you open. And once you're open, you don't want to be closed off again. And so it's hard to go back there. And even though it would be great to not have experienced some of these things, I probably don't really want to do that. But we had a great life. I have 4 kids, Trevor, Rykar, McCall, and Cooper. And Trevor has 2 kids, right now 14 and 10, and they're darling, and we love them, and we're really close. And then McCall, my third, has 3 kids, and they're little ones. Yes, my little girl, my princess. They call her the favorite child, but she's not. But anyway, yeah, she has 3 toddlers, and they're just fun. And then Cooper is living his life. He's 30 and having a good time. And yeah, we have a great life and had a great life because we were all really close, and they still hang out at my house all the time, just like they did before. Yeah, it's like wonderful. And it's sounding really good. It's not perfect, but it's wonderful.
No, their family. I've had a lot of experience with them, and they're one of the most fun families out there, and they're genuine. And the card game house that everyone has in their neighborhood, everyone's walking in and out of Jody Hazen's house, and her husband, Bruce, is always bringing treats and gifts to literally people he probably doesn't even know, and everyone he does know.
He's kind of called the donut guy. He takes donuts. He brings donuts to church when it's inappropriate to have donuts at church. He brings treats. He'll meet you outside in the hallway with a brand new treat that he found. I mean, seriously, it's not good. It's good and it's not good, but everybody loves him.
Yeah, it's not good. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And so let's dive into let's hear about Rykar. Who was Rykar like growing up, and what are some of your favorite unique things about Rykar?
Yeah. Rykar was an amazing child, and from day one, I know this is crazy to say now, but from day one, he had a different spirit about him. He
What makes you say that?
he was, and I've noticed it in other kids now, where it's funny that now I'm more aware of it. But at the time, he just was very sensitive. He just seemed very intuitive, and he seemed a little older for his age, like an old soul lived inside of him. But then when he talked, he was not like, it would come out not so bright, like funny. Like, wait, because he acted like he was an old soul, but then when I don't even know how to
goofy.
explain it. When he tried to express himself, it was funny. I don't know how to explain how intuitive he was. He was always worried about and being the caretaker in our family, and he was also worried about the one across the street, or if he saw a homeless person, or if he saw someone hurting. He was just very, very caring. And I've said before any of this happened, I felt like I had to teach him how to survive in the world. I didn't think he would survive junior high. I was worried about him in junior high because he was sentimental and tender. I think I told this story. A good way to explain it was, we had him in football, and he said he came off the field and he said, "Mom, I can't play. They just want me to hit people. He keeps just telling me to hit people." And I'm like, "That's football, honey. That's football." And then one time he came home, and we were in the car with Trevor, his older brother, who's very good at life and street smart. And he said, they keep saying bad things about you, Mom. And I was like, "What do you mean? About me? I don't even know them." And they said, "Your mom is so ugly." And I was like, "They call me ugly?" And no, he said, "Your mom's so ugly." And I was like, "They call me ugly." And then my older son said, "Rykar, that's, your mom is so ugly." And
Some of your mama jokes.
Yeah, the mama jokes. But he took it so, and I'm like, "I don't think you should play football." We put him in tennis and golf, and he went on his way. But he really was just a gatherer and an old soul kind of kid. We went on a humanitarian trip when he was 17, and he came home a different person. And I was nervous about him going on a mission because I thought he is not going to be able to handle the poverty because it affected him so deeply.
What do you think impacted him so deeply? Like, why was that a life-altering moment for him?
I mean, the word empath is used a lot in this generation, but back then it was just he had an empathy that kind of went too far. It affected him to a degree that it just kind of went too far, that I worried about him. He came home and started writing. He always wrote. That's another thing. From the time he was 12 years old, if we would be in church or anywhere, he'd have little scraps of paper, and he would just write his thoughts on it. Very profound thoughts. But then when he spoke, he wasn't that profound. My kids will laugh at that, but it's true. And then you'd read something and you're like, I can't believe that's inside of him, because he had really deep thoughts, and he saw the world as it should be seen, maybe. And it just felt like he was living on a higher level in his mind. And I know a lot of people say things like this about people when there's been a tragedy, but it really is true with Rykar. I know it to my core because I'm his mom.
Yeah. Something that keeps popping into my mind is I have a vivid memory of him asleep on a chair in your basement, and he was a deep sleeper, and we put Cheetos up his nose, and we put all types of things all over his face and all over his body, and he just slept through it. And I thought it was the funniest thing. And I was probably like 12 years old, and I have that vivid video in my mind of him waking up after there was like 20 pounds of candy. And
I think he was a narcoleptic really now. I really do think now he was, and everybody has a story like that with him.
Yeah.
They wrote on his legs with Sharpies. They did so many things to that child. And he would, the minute he fell asleep, your mom's a little like that. and yeah, lots of funny stories about him sleeping.
Definitely.
Yep, till the very end.
Quick thing on my mom. We went to the Jazz game, and I look over and she is dead asleep at a Jazz game. If that gives you any clue.
Yep, that's Rykar. And when you fell asleep, you fall asleep.
Oh yeah.
Like, okay.
Well, if it's all right with you, let's dive into what kind of happened and what that was like to go through that time.
Yeah, sure. Rykar was living in Phoenix. He'd moved there to he went to Phoenix on a tennis scholarship to go to college there, and he did great until the week after his first match. He had the first match, and then the week after his second match, he longboarded down a hill, because that's smart when you have a tennis scholarship, and broke his collarbone. So he lost his scholarship, and he didn't go back to college. He went to be an MRI sonographer, and so he was doing that down there. And the company he was working for had gone out of business, and so he lost his job in November of 2017. And so he was really looking for a job during that time, which is now a blessing, because we went on a big dirt biking trip with just the boys in November. He came up in January for the Super Bowl. We went down there in February. He came up in March. Did he come up to ski? It was just crazy now when we look back at things, how grateful we are for those 6 months. Trevor and McCall and I went down in April. McCall was coming home from a trip, and in September she called me and said, "Hey, Mom, what if I come back from Virginia and I come back through Phoenix for spring break?" This was September before, and I said, "Sure, and we'll just meet Rykar." So luckily 2 weeks before Rykar's accident, McCall was there. So he saw every one of the kids, and I just know God's hand was in that. There is no doubt in my mind that God's hand is in that. So anyway, so we had seen him 2 weeks before, and came home, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and we were playing Pictionary on the deck with all the kids except for Cooper. Luckily, all our kids were there, and I feel like that was a miracle also, that my kids were all home. And McCall received a text message that said, "Are you Rykar Hazen's sister? We've been trying to get a hold of you. There's been an accident, and if it is, will you please call this number?" So I went in and I called the number.
So McCall got that message, and then what did she tell you?
We were playing Pictionary with the kids, and she just said, "Mom, look." And it was from an unknown number, and it just said, "Are you Rykar Hazen's sister?" Long story on how that came down, but it had been an hour or so that they had been trying to reach us, because you don't carry your parents' name in your wallet. So another miracle on how kind of came down like this, and 2 sets of 5 people reached us at almost exactly the same moment. And somebody texted Bruce right while I was talking on the phone almost to the police officer. So anyway, it's one of those phone calls. I intuitively got up and went in the other room and answered the phone, and they just said there had been an accident, and it was a friend of the driver's had called. So hard, because he died with a boy named Trevor. The driver of the car's name is Trevor, and my son's name is Trevor, Rykar's brother. But the driver of the car, Trevor's friend, was driving home from church and saw his friend's car. Trevor and Tanner, this boy, had rebuilt cars. That's what they did for a living. They rebuilt Corvettes and Camaros, and they'd made a great living doing this. And so he drove by and saw the car, and it had gone around the corner too fast and skidded out into a field. But it was a big cornfield, and it's strange, because it could have skidded out if it had landed anywhere else, but because of where it skidded out, it was going 40 miles an hour and hit a ravine. And we were told that it killed them both instantly, but a year later I got a report and found that he had been alive. So, and full circle, a year later we went back and met the girl that had sat with him, and he was actually alive for 17 minutes.
Really?
That we didn't know about. But at the time, Tanner called and said that he had passed away. And I think probably a profound thing I think now to look back on was, I didn't realize it at the time, but apparently I just kept saying, "But did he die?" And Tanner had said that he told me 8 different times that he had died. And finally, he just gave the phone to the police officer and said, "You have to tell her, because she It's not registering. And I didn't realize I was doing that. But now I look back and I think when you tell a mom that their son has died or their child has died, you want any other answer. It's like, okay, but did he die? And if they say yes, you say, okay, but did he die? And I do remember saying that because it was like anything, but death I can handle, but just so final. So then it just went down like you would think it goes down, like the movies. People just scattered in their grief and their crying. And my oldest son ran outside, and then I went to find him, and we were grabbing grandkids, and I didn't want them to see and feel what was happening. Somebody grabbed them and took them up to play soccer in the front yard while Trevor ran out. I mean, it was just utter chaos. My husband was just sitting because he had just received the message, and he was just sitting. And I remember as I was running around their house trying to grab my kids, I looked at him and he was just glazed. And I think, isn't that interesting how we all do it so different? But I finally got all my kids, and I guess the moment that I will remember forever that is beautiful and horrible is I finally got all my kids in the kitchen, and we were laying on the kitchen floor, and I just finally had them all there, and I just kept saying, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. But we were finally all just laying on the kitchen floor, writhing in pain. I can't explain it any other way. And then we ended up calling Cooper, who was at Utah State, and he drove down. So yeah, that's a hard one. No matter when you tell it, I think 20 years from now, it was still, my heart's beating. I start to shake, and your body kind of has a trauma response to it. It's terrible.
It's just the hardest moment you can go through in life is finding out that you have a loved one that passed.
Yeah.
And there's no correct way to go about that.
Oh.
And whatever way you can handle in that moment, you'll never be as broken as you are in that moment.
Yeah.
And it is really interesting to see the different perspectives and how everyone handles such a moment, right?
Yeah, it's very interesting to go back now. We don't talk about that day very much, even still. Once in a while it will come up, but it's really true that, and from the beginning of that moment, people handle grief differently, and it's everyone handles it in their own way. And I now say, it doesn't matter. You handle it however you can survive it. Because at that moment on the kitchen floor, I thought, we will not survive this. This is a pain that I think you don't know what real pain is until you feel something so different that you beg for healing. Like you are literally begging for some higher power to escape this, because I don't believe that your mind and your body can literally handle it. I don't think it can handle it without a higher power. Yeah. I really don't.
I just think about my experience, and like people had told me, like, it seems like you've gone through a little bit in your life. And then when my dad passed, I was like, if you want to understand grief, imagine every single trial you have and put them all together in one moment, and then times that by 100, and you are near what it feels like to lose a family member. Yeah. And it's
interesting to talk to you, because I talked to you all about this and you hadn't experienced it, and you try so hard to feel it and understand it. Yeah. And then the minute that happened, you understood it. Yeah. I'm so sad that you have to understand it.
In a lot of ways, I'm sad that we've had to understand that, but in a lot of ways, it has been one of the most enlightening, crystallizing, like diamond force, yeah, where it brings out real beauty that you just can't experience in a different way than head on. And there's just a lot of beautiful lessons that involve grief that, yeah, none of us want. But when we try and make the best of the situation in whatever form that looks like. That's when there's true power and divinity comes in, and it's like, all right, God's gonna let me go through this. There's gonna be some purpose behind it, and there's gonna be compensation, and it's gonna be something beautiful through a long full circle in life. And it's hard to express if someone hasn't been through it.
Yeah.
But it's like the most horrific, beautiful experience I've gone through in my life, and a lot of people have gone through a lot worse.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to have a dad for 25 years.
Yeah.
And a lot of the world doesn't get that. And I don't want to talk about me anymore, but my dad was amazing and really changed a ton of lives. And
Absolutely.
And I think Rykar did that in such a Christ-like way. And we got to talk about you now. But
No, I appreciate it, Jaxon, really. I think there's something about that. I went to a grief conference, and it was for people who had lost a child, but it was 800 people. And I walked in, and it was just this huge conference room. And I thought, oh my gosh, you don't have to say a word in this room.
Everyone gets it.
Only because everyone had not my exact experience, but they had lost a child. And it was so powerful. And exactly what you said, it's like, and I think that's why it's hard to go back to life before, because you are deeper and more real and raw. But by the time you're our age, you're young. By the time you're our age, everybody has a story. But I had not, in our family, we had not experienced loss. We had barely experienced grandparents. And so I can't believe I'm looking around now going, I didn't even know people died until Rykar died. And now I'm like, everyone's dying. And I think it's just because I was unaware.
Totally.
Yet everyone experiences it. I don't know where I was living. I was just playing soccer.
No, we're in La La Land.
Yeah.
An example of that, I was in my car with some friends, and there was some driver that was kind of driving like an idiot, and they're like, what is this guy doing? And I was like, I don't know, but like maybe a family member just died or something. And it's like that's the instant first
thought
go to, and it's like, let's
you
give them
give
benefit.
everybody grace.
Yeah.
You instantly give everybody grace, or you give no grace. I find myself, I give everybody grace, or then someone's talking about something, and I'm like, have a problem.
Yeah.
I was probably you. And now it's like, so I either give a lot, or I'm like, I'm going to punch you right now.
Yeah.
Because what you're talking about is so elementary.
Yeah.
You know, that was a hard one for a while. For a couple of years, I couldn't listen to very much. Bruce still only listens to Christian music, I think, and it's been 5 years because things feel so dumb. That dumb's a stupid word, but just very, elementary, pedestrian. I don't know.
Yeah. Everyone has different ways that they experience grief. What has been something beneficial for your path with grief?
Probably when you share your grief, or you don't even have to share it, but when someone knows that you've been through something like this, they open themselves up to you. You are instantly approachable. Well, you're either unapproachable or you're approachable. For a while, no one knows what to do or say, but if you have any kind of a real conversation with someone, it goes deep really quick, and there's very little superficiality to it. And I love that. I think it clarifies who you really are. I think it strips away everything, and you get this wonderful, cool opportunity to be your elevated self, maybe, and to I would say for sure, so many good things come from it. I just don't know. Like I said, I have a word a year, and I have for 15 years. I did it before it was cool to do it and everybody was doing it. But there, you mentioned compensation. There is healing through compensation. There is a greater power. You can almost live in a different dimension for a while, because I think when things get broken, God comes really close. And I will never, ever be able to not deny that feeling and who carries you. And when that leaves a little bit, you can go back and go, how in the world did I ever do that? There is no way you do it without it. And for me, that's probably the number one thing, is for sure my relationship with God and Jesus. It's like I constantly say, God, Rykar, Jesus. I don't know who's doing this, but you're right there.
Someone's doing something.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if I need something, God, Rykar, Jesus, you know.
Yeah. Like you just talked about how you feel your body when you go back in time of what your body does when you go through trauma, right?
Yeah.
And we'll get into how that's actually helped you in the future, right? It did.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting. It's a definite trauma response. My teeth begin to shatter and my body begins to shake, and I did it for about a year. Just in the middle of the night, I would have a real trauma. And I think that's because moms have that more sometimes. And I think it's because your child comes from you and it's in your DNA, and that death and birth they are very connected. And I think I have the same response when I have a child. And I had the same response when Rykar died. The next morning it was almost like labor, physical, transitional. And I mean, I don't know if that's interesting or not, but I find it so interesting to me. But yeah, and it's just interesting when I go back to that moment, the crash is a trauma moment.
It's a hard moment. Yeah. Something I have to acknowledge, and I don't love talking about my story, but
no,
Jody, the night my dad passed, Jody actually came to the house, and she was just a comfort to everyone there. And
yeah, it was the middle of the night.
It's so crazy actually how important Jody and Rykar have been in my grief journey, because before my dad passed, I literally was subconsciously like prepping myself by learning your story, doing your documentary, and saw like the positive and the negative of how to handle things. And there were so many dots that were connected that night. And
such a moment.
Yeah.
Such a moment. For me, I didn't even say it to you, I don't think. It was just me going, are you kidding me? You look back in hindsight and see God's hand in the details of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was big.
So when Rykar passed, I was actually on my mission in Mexico. I served an LDS mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I just remember crying in some stupid computer room in the middle of a city in Mexico, and feeling so sad. And I think in the first couple of weeks, I went over to Jody's house to just hear their stories. And I told Jody, I was like, I am going to write a book on Rykar's life. Like, this is amazing. There's so much cool insights. So it's hard for me to push away from that and talk about anything else. And I do want to get back to that. And
Rykar was a special soul, and he continued on. He went to the DR on his mission, and like I said, the poverty there affected him in a deep, deep way. And he came home and moved to Phoenix, and he was like a quiet giant that no one knew. He very much liked to live maybe under the radar, and never, almost to a fault, would he not. There's the scripture, I don't boast of myself, only of Jesus. And he took that so to heart. I have a scripture for each one of my kids, and I give it to him, whenever it comes to me. And I had that one for Rykar when he was 14. So he had a very strong feeling of humility, but almost to a fault where I don't know, the pendulum swung a little too far. But he gave a lot of his money away. He made a very good living, and he lived very, very minimally. I would go to his house, and he didn't have enough to make cookies. He dated a girl, and the girl said, hey, let's make some cookies. And then she said, I realized to make the cookies would cost us like $60 because he needed a cookie sheet and a beater or whatever. He just didn't have anything.
Yeah.
And he lived very minimally. And it wasn't, our relationship was strained a little bit in that because I was the mother going, you got to bring something to the table, dude, to get a wife, you know? And
Yeah.
he was like, yeah, you know, and he just always did. He just did things under the radar. And so it was really cool. It's really cool. I know after he died to hear all these wonderful stories. We'd hear all these stories and that's a joke in our family. We'd say, oh, that is not even real. That's so amazing. Except for that part where Rykar died, you know, because over and over we had just so many cool stories about him.
Yeah. Tell us one of your favorites. Or what was one that like just hit your heart and you're like, I am so proud of Rykar.
Yeah. Almost everyone I talked to in Phoenix at the open house. We went to an open house in Phoenix that one of his friends had for him before we came home to the funeral. And I got there and I thought there'd be maybe, 20 people. He seemed to live kind of a loner more of a life, I thought. But I realized later that when I went to see him, he didn't hang with his friends. Apparently, when I wasn't there, he had a big group of people. And so when we got there, there were so many people. And every person was so different. He had from every walks of life. There were people, and probably the one that stood out was a guy with this big, huge, long beard and dark hair, and just didn't look. I mean, he didn't look homeless, but he looked kind of just rougher. And he caught me and got me in a corner, and he said, I play pool at this. It was kind of like a sports bar.
Yeah.
It was a sports bar, and yeah, like a Iggy's kind of. I don't know. Anyway, he said he got there, and he said one day, I was just sitting, and Rykar came up to me, and he says I didn't know him, but he just said, "Hey, how you doing, dude?" And he said, "I'm not great." And he said, "I just broke up with my girlfriend," and he said, I was pounding him pretty good, and he said, Rykar said to me, "Don't do that. This isn't going to be good for you." He said, "I'll tell you what." He said, "I'm just going to come and talk to you." And instead of, he said, tell me, instead of drinking so much, I'll just come and sit by you. And he said, I'm going to come and I'm going to sit here with you every night until you're through this. And he said,
what do you think through this meant?
Through his, he just said, until I get through this breakup or whatever, And he said, because I was really upset about it. And he said, but the part was, the guy came every night and sat by me for 6 months. We would just hang out, not every night, but every time I would go, I'd let him know, and he'd come, and it became a thing. And he didn't know a soul at that open house. I don't even know how they found him. Somebody must have in the apartment complex, but he, that was one that kind of took me back. But Rykar had a life where he wasn't married, and he wasn't he didn't have a family, and so he created a family. Another lady that he'd moved in his apartment complex 6 months before he passed away showed up when we were getting his body, and we were in the apartment, and she was sobbing uncontrollably and called him her son and told me that, he showed up for her always. I could go on and on. One time
How did he show up for her?
He visited her. He took her things. He looked at her. She felt seen and heard. She called him her boy, and she sat on my couch, and her and I just sobbed on the couch when she said she'd been waiting to hear us come, and then she heard me crying, and that's why she came up, because she wanted to be with me. Just so many crazy stories. The one where I got to his house one time, and he didn't have a bed, and I'm like, "You don't have a bed? Where's your bed?" And he said, "I sold my bed. I'm going to get a bed." And he just wrote it out. And I was like, "Rykar, you have to have a bed." And we got in a little fight. Like, you have to have a bed. Like, I get that you don't. I went and bought a microwave so that when I went there, I had a microwave. I felt like he was honoring the poverty that he saw in the DR. And even though he couldn't help it, he walked his walk and talked his talk, and he would honor them. So the pendulum swung a little deep with him. But anyway, he said he didn't have a bed, and I was mad at him. I said, you got to get a bed. Whatever, you got to get a bed. So there it is. And we fought a little bit because it was about 8 months that he didn't have a bed because he could sleep anywhere. So he would just sleep on the floor, sleep on the chair. After
what happened to his bed?
So one thing, after he died, McCall, my daughter at the funeral, said she talked to probably over 20 people who had slept in his bed while he slept on the floor at that in Phoenix. And so anyway, 8 months went by, he still didn't have a bed. He dies. I'm at the open house, and this guy came up and said, I used to live in Rykar's apartment complex. And he said one time there was a single lady moving in, and Rykar said, hey, let's go help this lady. He said, we went and helped her. We were moving the stuff in, and he said, well, do you need anything else? And she said, all I've got to do is find a bed for my twins. And Rykar said, really? Because I'm getting rid of my bed. He said, I'm actually was going to take it to the Goodwill or sell it, so, I'll bring it down to you. And then the guy said, he just gave her his bed, and then he never had a bed for 8 months. And I stood there at the funeral going, okay, gave his bed away. Sorry, Rykar. Whatever, because we'd had an issue about him not having a bed. In fact, 5 months before he died, he called and said, hey, Mom, you want to go buy a bed with me? And so in October, we went and kind of bought a few things for his apartment, which is, I think, was for me because now I have a few things of his. Yeah. Because nobody would have anything. But anyway, that was just what he did. I could go on and on with so many stories.
Yeah.
So many stories. Cool.
He wrote these Who Am I's growing up. I think they're just so interesting in that depth you talk about with Rykar. Do you remember any of them?
A little bit. That's probably the best indicator, maybe, telling. Like I said, when he came home from Mexico, he was 17 years old, and he just wrote, we'd gone to see Les Mis, and it really affected him. Les Mis became our family's Broadway show. It's our mantra. We have 24601 necklaces. It's just our thing. But it became more of that later. But at that time, he was only 17. We had just gone to see Les Mis. Then we went on this humanitarian trip, and he came home and he wrote, Who Am I? If you know Les Mis, you know Who Am I? When he sings, Who Am I? I'm Jean Valjean. So he wrote this little, and it was just when he was 17, we put it on the back of his program, and it said, Who am I, this young boy, to have so much after Mexico, whose $10 lunch money could feed a family for a month? Who am I to, I can't remember exactly. I got to think better. But anyway, at the end, he just said, he actually loved John the Baptist, was his hero, and he wrote, Who am I? I go as John to prepare the way. I am a Latter-day Saint. I am a soldier in God's army, and I will fight the fight. Can't remember the rest of it, but that was the ending of it. That was when he was 17. After he died, we went to his house, and we were looking through a folder of things he'd written. And on the plane ride home, I opened it and just started reading, and I had found one that he wrote when he was 27. And he actually wrote it for a writing class, I think, when he was at college. Well, so he couldn't have been. So he must have just been 20, 22 or something. But anyway, I think that was the middle one. Anyway, we ended up finding three Who Am I things. And he would just write, Who am I? Am I Dominican? Am I American? Am I a busboy? Am I all of his jobs? What kind of house will I live in? What job will I have? He wrote all these questions. Who am I? What clothes will I wear? And then he wrote, wait, wrong questions. Who am I? Am I kind? Am I compassionate? Am I loving? What kind of a father will I be? What kind of a husband will I be? Am I a good brother? How long will I live? Am I alive? Am I dead? Literally so many of these words. And that was the second one that we found. And then the last one he wrote kind of the same thing. And at the end he wrote, instead of asking the questions, he wrote, Who is Rykar? And then he wrote, Rykar is kind. Rykar is good. He is a good brother. He is a compassionate father. He is alive. He is the son of a living God. He is home. And that gave us the most peace we've ever had, was those three. So each one of my kids wrote and read one of the Who Am I's, because it told so much about him, and it also, was so comforting for us.
But yeah,
That's
it's
as
so
a miracle.
profound.
Yeah, it's really, those three are miracles
Yeah.
in our lives, that he was compelled to write those 10 years before he passed away.
All right. One miracle thing, you got to talk about feathers. Why is that? Why is that a thing?
Yeah. The night Rykar died, 4:00 in the morning, they had just called from the organ donation place. I was in a state. I had had a long day. And I had just told them that they could take everything, because I knew he had given everything when he was alive. And I knew he wanted to give everything when he was gone. I told him I needed to keep his head and his hands, but he gave everything else away. He gave his long bones, his vessels, his heart valves. He gave his skin. He gave everything. But so I just walked in from talking to them, and I was pretty much a mess. And I sat down and I said, McCall, just sit down with me. I want to write down a few of the things that has happened today, because I will never be able to feel this again, and I need to know. And so I just sat down and wrote, while you were on earth, Rykar, you have given everything. In Phoenix, on your mission, you, as a young boy, you gave everything you could. And now you passed away, and I just told them that they could take everything from your body. So now you've given everything in death. And I said, I don't know what it's like there, but if you can give anything, if there's anything you can still give, and you have any power in this, I'm asking for a divine language, some kind of a language where I will be able to know. Because as a mom at that point, at that moment, I was like, I cannot accept never talking to you again. You cannot tell a mom that she never gets to talk to her child again. I still can't accept it. It's not acceptable. It's not survivable. I can't accept it. Not through that stage yet. But I said, if there's a way, I have to know how to communicate to you, with you. I said, first of all, give it to your brother, because him and Trevor were really close, and Trevor was a mess. And as a mom, I was so worried about Trevor. I said, find some language that you can communicate with him, that he will know it's you. And then if there's a second gift you can give one to me. I need one. I need some kind of a communication that I don't know yet. And I can't understand it. Anyway, that was just in this little thing I wrote. Cool part of the story, since I've already told this part. That was at 4 a.m. I got done. I looked at McCall. We hugged. We walked to the mirror. And we looked so bad. It was so bad. We laugh now. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I said, this is horrible. It was just grief. It was pure grief. And then I started to sing Empty Chairs and Empty Faces from Les Mis. Empty chairs and empty faces. It's the worst. Anyway, at the end of it, it says, I can't even remember it now because I'm spaced up. Anyway, I sang this little Les Mis song. And as I sang it, I went, oh, and I looked at McCall and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I ran to my sink because Rykar had left his 24601 necklace on the tree by my sink. And that was like 10 seconds after I had said, give me a divine language. Why did I sing Empty Chairs and Empty Faces from Les Mis? Why did I remember? Other people will say that wasn't Rykar. No way, that wasn't Rykar. Right, like 20 seconds after I had asked for a divine language, I knew it was him. That was before we'd found the Who Am I things. Very full circle moments. So when we went to the crash site, we went to pick up Rykar 3 days later. We went at 11 o'clock to the crash site, and there was a feather sticking in the ground. And people have heard about feathers. You kind of hear coins and feathers and, I don't know, dragonflies and butterflies, I think, are some of the common languages of love from people. But this feather was there, and I thought, someone has put this cute feather there. And I took it home, and I thought, this is amazing, and I just kept that feather. Well, whether it's subconscious or not, from then on, we found feathers. I found feathers probably more than... Well, Bruce just found one a couple of days ago. So it's kind of in our family, but mostly for me. I have a drawer full of feathers that I'm going to frame somehow in some way because it's just cool. So we found a feather. To tell you a full circle, a year later, when I went to meet with the girl that sat with Rykar, she didn't know I'd found a feather in the grass. And I pulled up with McCall to the house, and I said to McCall, I started doing this, shaking, trauma, and I said, I'm about to do the most horrifying thing, the worst thing any mother would ever want to do. I can't believe I'm doing this. I cannot believe I have to go and meet this girl. And I was getting very worked up and I had anxiety. And so we just took a breath. I said, okay. I just took a breath. And while I was sitting there, I got out of the car and Jasmine, who had sat with Rykar, walked out. She had 3 little yellow roses and she had a little Post-it note. I wish I had it. And it was a scripture about the wings of the feather. Will wrap around. He will wrap his arms around you like the wings of feathers of wings or something. I look at me, I don't even know it. But Jasmine gave me a scripture about feathers. And so the first thing I said was, did you put the feather at the crash site? And she was like, no. And I thought, oh my gosh.
And who is Jasmine?
So
How does
Jasmine
she connect?
was the one that sat with Rykar. I looked at the police report. She had written a note that Rykar was alive as a witness. And so I called her a year to the date. We have so many full circles. It was exactly a year that we were there for the organ donation thing on Rykar's death date, the 28th. Rykar's death date's the 29th. So I called Jasmine and said, can I come and meet you? And she said, I have been waiting every day for this year for you to call me. I have prayed for Trevor and Rykar every day. She was a pastor's daughter. She was a born-again girl, and she was so sweet and darling. So I walked up, we sat down, and it was like I was in a different place. Crickets, birds, this beautiful 23-year-old girl that I was coming really to help her because I felt like she had experienced a horrible trauma. She was peaceful. She was beautiful. She told me about sitting with him for 17 minutes while he was alive. I didn't even know that. She had twins. She was just this most beautiful girl. And she brought me a scripture about feathers. Yeah. Anyway, I could go on and on. We left her house and we went to go to the crash site. And as we passed it, we looked up and there was a sign that said Hazen Road. My last name's Hazen. My son had passed away maybe a football field away from Hazen Road. And we didn't know that.
A different state.
45 minutes from his house. He was going to Trevor's house for dinner after church. And I could not believe it. I called Jasmine back and I said, Jasmine, did Rykar die right next to Hazen Road? And you know what she said? Yes, that's how I knew I was appointed or anointed to be with your son. Because when I got there, I thought he was from Buckeye because Hazen Road was right there. I had no idea he was from Utah. And she's like, when I found out he was from Utah, he died next to Hazen Road. She said, I knew that God had anointed me to sit with your child. But had I not gone, I'm like, Jasmine, you could have told me that. That's kind of big. But it was crazy. I mean, crazy cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, God, Rykar, Jesus, for that divine language. So that's kind of feathers and
yeah.
cool.
So there's so much to talk about.
I'm sorry,
actually.
I'm long.
No, it's amazing. What have been some of your biggest lessons that have come out of this?
Maybe just like you said, to give people grace, for sure. I give a lot of people grace. To best for sure was getting to know my Savior on a deeper level. And to know that looking through death's eyes is like looking through God's eyes. You tend to forget the bad. You don't want to talk about the bad. You don't want people to talk about things that nobody's perfect. Your dad wasn't perfect. Rykar wasn't perfect. Do we talk about the stuff that wasn't perfect with Rykar? No. We talk about how he gave his money to the homeless. And I've tried to look at things differently that way. I think that's been a blessing. For sure, family relationships. It's another one that we hate, that because we've gotten so close and we'll say things together, and then also we'll say, oh, except for that part where Rykar passed away. There's some layers to that I probably need to go to therapy for, because you kind of go, oh, wish we could have had that before. But there's just something that happens where you've experienced something very emotional and very traumatic, and you recognize how important and what's really important. And my kids have recognized that. My husband's recognized that. And we're a different family because of it. And so are you. Yours is too, Jaxon. Yeah. Lots of lessons.
Yeah. How did it change your relationship with God and the Savior?
I think I told a few people the first year of Rykar's death, I would say, I haven't prayed since Rykar died, and I haven't stopped praying since Rykar died. I had a really hard time kneeling down. Another thing I said is, when Rykar passed away, I doubted everything I ever believed in. But everything I ever believed in was the only thing that got me up in the morning. So I was constantly living in this. It took my faith to a completely new level. It took it to a new place. What do you really believe? Do you really believe? And can you survive with just that knowledge? Faith, I like real. I touch, see, feel, hear. I'm mortal. And so it's really hard to, not have that. That's tough still. It's still hard. Pictures are hard. Those things are hard. But yeah, so many lessons and so much. My relationship with God and Jesus is totally different because it is real and it's raw still. And I still have a hard time praying in a formal way because it's kind of like, when you get hurt, you're 10 years old and you're in 5th grade and you skin your knee and you break your leg. Say you break your leg. You go to the principal's office and you sit there and you're just fine. And then your mom walks in and you fall apart. I feel like that's how it is with Heavenly Father. Like, I do fine. I'm good. But then if I really say, Heavenly Father, then I fall apart. So I've got a different relationship now with him that I'm still navigating.
And then with the Savior, how is that different?
Like, to be completely honest, I think you swing. You swing. I think the biggest thing is that you share every emotion with him, for me. I think before it was more controlled, a relationship that's more controlled. Now it seems more honest, maybe. Honest and genuine, to where I think one of the things I felt the most, this is a good way to explain it. Like I said, I couldn't pray. And going to church was really hard. I felt like church was what I needed the most. But when I got there, the emotion was too much for me. And so I would sneak in, I'd sneak out. I wanted to be with people. I didn't want to be with people. It was just this very hard thing. And I wanted to be alone, but I didn't want to be alone, kind of thing. But I only wanted my sisters. There were very few people that I could really connect with. And I kind of felt that way with Jesus. I kept feeling like I would run every emotion through him. But I will say, I always felt the coolest thing that I'd never felt before was he took me exactly where I was. And when I was mad and get this pain out of me, I physically just get this pain out of me, and then I would get mad, and I'm dramatic. Hey, I'm dramatic. Look at me. I wailed and I screamed. It wasn't quiet. I didn't have quiet grief when I was alone. And I thought the coolest thing was I always felt from Jesus that he was just sad for me. I never felt like I was judged. I never felt like he was mad because I'd had this great childhood and a great foundation and a great love for him, and he'd given me everything, and Rykar was giving me everything he could to help me, and I would still be mad or I'd still be sad. And you know what? I only felt like, I'm so sad that you have to feel this every time. That's what I felt from him. Or I'd wake up in the middle of the night with my head spinning, and then all of a sudden I would go, oh, and I could just feel like the veil so thin, and I loved that feeling. And I would get up and just kind of walk around my house and see things through his eyes. I would see everything in my house kind of like from a different perspective, and I felt like it was his perspective kind of through me. I don't even know how to explain it. I just feel like you're so close. It's kind of like, I told my kids this the other day, when 9/11 happened, the whole country, I don't know if you remember this because you're young, but it felt like there was a spirit in the country. And I've often said, oh, that was Jesus, because so many people were mourning and so many people were in grief that he came close, so the whole country felt it. And I think when you are going through real trauma and real grief, he just comes close. And you don't, if you're paying attention or you're desiring it, you can't deny it. But my thing that I loved about it was that he accepted me at every emotion. And I would say that's where it changed the most, my understanding that he's just sad for me. He's not judging me. He's not wanting more. He wants me to be better, but he takes me where I'm at. But he treats me like I'm already where he wants me to be. I don't even know how to explain that. I don't know. I'm not very articulate in that.
Oh, I think you said that really, really well. That I think your visibility is aligned in some shape or form with God when you see someone for their potential and not where they're at in a struggling moment.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's, I don't know, if you notice in your world when you see people in a way that you want to help them, it's so forgiving and it's so supportive, and you come across way more confident. You come across just as a pure friend, and you don't need to get anything out of it. And I feel like,
yeah, that's a key.
yeah, um, with Jesus, he just gave you everything, and
Yeah.
he just wants to help you, and that's like divinity with God and Jesus. Is it's like, I'm trying to give you a blueprint, and you can take it how you want.
And I'll stay with you. I felt like I'll stay with you till you get there. And I won't even give you an expectation. And it's okay if you're not there yet. I mean, that's like you said, it's a very unconditional love with a hope that you'll be better. But I think it's because he knows with him you will be.
Yeah.
You know, you get opportunities to know him in a better way that can only come with pain, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, one of the gospel principles in the Church of Jesus Christ is that one day we have the potential to become like our Heavenly Father in Jesus Christ. And so, to a certain extent, to be like them and to become like a God, we have to go through godly emotions, experiences, which includes so much depth. And the rawest forms of every emotion, every type of connection. And so it's like, we're not just gonna fly by this experience. And
I heard a quote once that said, if you want to take on the characteristics of Christ, pain will be involved. I'm like, I always remember that sentence because I'm like, oh, I don't want that one. Yeah, but you're right, exactly.
Very true. Well, we're gonna have a part 2, but Jody, your life and how you express this journey through grief with Rykar is so unique and so powerful. And for anyone that hasn't gone through grief, what is some advice you want to give them?
Probably just to give yourself grace. Doesn't matter how you do it. Whatever you do, however you have to do it to survive is okay and is good and fine. And, I have people in my own family that, for me, I wanted to feel the emotion. I had a feeling, or from things I've read, like, I don't want to feel it 5 years from now. I'm going to feel this to my core, and I will do what I have to do. I'm going to sit in it. I'm going to do it. Other people give me a distraction. I need to be, thank heavens I had Bruce, who was, I think I read a book that was, there was an industrial griever and an intuitive griever and a avoider and an escaper. I mean, there's all kinds of clinical terms. But I remember thinking, I'm so grateful that Bruce was an industrial griever for the first few months because he took on how to go get him and how to, all the logistical stuff was left to him. And, my kids have memories of me crying upstairs and him on the phone to Delta and to the U-Haul and to the mortuary and all of the logistical things that have to take place. And so how great it is. So, it's really easy to go, Howard, you're not even feeling this, or hello, can I get some help here? It's very easy to have conflict. And also, I would probably say, we haven't talked about this, but to find some meaning in the grief. And that's what we did with our One Soul charity. We did a charity for Rykar. And I think that was probably the most healing thing we could do as a family that year, was to do that.
So what is the One Soul charity?
So I can tell you a little bit about that. I feel like God's hand was in that. About, I don't know if it was months or a year before, Trevor, my oldest, wanted to start a charity on his own. It was his charity. It was called One Soul Charity. He registered it. He had it in place. He hadn't done anything with it, but he had done all that. Call it what you want. We call it God. Putting that. And now it's his charity. It's Trevor's charity. It's not just Rykar's. It's back to Trevor's charity now. But because it was in place, we decided, because Rykar was such a giver, we didn't want any flowers. So we just, at that moment, said, everybody, instead of doing flowers and things, I just had a thought, sorry. Give money to this charity. And then we said, we will just take this money and use it all year. And we did it kind of selfishly. We thought, we'll just take this money and go do fun things with it. And we did. We literally did things with that money all year long. And it was so great. It's just funny now because we did it and spent all the money doing things all year long. And then we decided, he found online, again, I believe through God, Trevor was Googling charities, and he found one that was called the Starfish Foundation in the Dominican Republic, where he served. And it's the starfish story, where it's the story of he's picking up starfish. Somebody on the beach is picking up starfish, and somebody finds him and says, "What are you doing? Did you see all the starfish? You're not going to, you can't change anything, and you're not making a difference. You've got so many starfish here." I'm telling it horribly, but the point was, the guy said he picked up the starfish and threw it in the ocean and said, made a difference to that one. And so it just seemed perfect because it was one soul. And so Trevor called Louise, look her up, she's amazing, Webster, and she had started this foundation in the Dominican Republic where they build homes for people that can't. And you raise the money, and then you go, or you don't have to go, but if you want to, you can go tear the house down, the one they're living in, and then they use the funds to use workers there in the Dominican Republic to build a home. So we decided, after we'd spent all the money, we decided, he'd found this foundation, I think probably February, March, that we would do on his death day, year anniversary, we did a big charity fundraiser. We did a 5K, we did a lunch, we did, everybody donated things, we had an auction for things, we did a bakery, we did a basketball shootout. We did a clown. We did everything you can imagine. It was amazingly fun. Bruce sang without his shirt on, the Star Spangled Banner. We got everybody to give money. And, you know, we had to earn $13,000, and we earned $13,000, a little more than $13,000. And so our whole family went back to his mission to build this house for, it ended up being for, oh my gosh, Rosie and Tiburon. And it was amazing. We got to go and tear the house down and beat the heck out of it. And we cried and sobbed as we hammered the house down in our grief. And I remember saying to Trevor, Rykar would die. He literally would say, I'll die if Tiburon could have a house, because that is who Rykar was. And I was like, he would have. He's so happy right now. He thinks it's worth it. You know, we were just having all these emotions. It was crazy. But at the same time, we did that. And then we went back to Rykar's mission, and we met 2 or 3 people that he had baptized, and his people he loved. One was Pedro, who is running for office right now. His wife is running for office. He ran for office 4 years ago or so and lost, and now his wife is running for office, and we're waiting to find out the details. He's trying to change his little country for good, and him and Rykar were best friends, and I didn't know that they had stayed in contact, but we went and found him, and he told us that night that he had texted Rykar, and they had kept in contact all those years, and he got a last text from him in March and never knew what happened. And so we just were so grateful that we'd gone back to meet him, and we've become really close to him. And then we went to another area and met his housekeeper that he loved, and we are now building a house for her, redoing her house right now. We're waiting to go paint it. And Pedro, actually, who lives 2 hours away, has been our liaison. So his two people, Pedro the politician and Ramona the housekeeper who lives up in the village with nothing. Pedro is now our little liaison and goes and has helped her rebuild her house, and we give him the money and he goes and makes it work. So anyway, we're going to have a full circle moment, hopefully before summer, and go back and paint it. But I say all that to tell you that healed our family, to do something good in the name of Rykar. And it doesn't have to be a charity, but I would say find something with your loved one that he loves. If it's basketball, then, you know, do basketball. If it's whatever it is, I feel like that has been really healing for our family, to keep him alive and to try to do things that he would love. And for sure he would die if he thought Ramona was going to get a house. He said, I one night prayed and said, why don't you just tell me to build a house for Ramona? We would have just built her a house. You don't have to die, because nothing would make him happier than for her to have a house. So, you know, I don't have a lot of advice because it's so unique and so personal.
You gotta say about Rykar in Dominican Republic.
Just how he was, who he was.
No, the other Rykar.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. I'm sorry. I forgot that. So when we went back to meet Ramona, the housekeeper, we went back to meet her, and I had gone back with Rykar after his mission 6 months before. Okay, 6 months after Rykar came home from his mission, I went back with him. Mm-hmm. So we'd gone around to see everybody. So we went and met Ramona. Her son and daughter were there, and her daughter was pregnant at the time. So this was 15 years before Rykar died. And she was pregnant, but we met all of the family, and I think Ramona was probably his favorite. He loved this family. And anyway, he just had such a special, I'll tell you how much. We went to Ramona's house, okay? This was 6 months after Rykar came home. We went in her house, and we went in her bedroom, and when I got to her bedroom, I looked up, and there was a picture of me and my siblings above her bed. It was the most surreal moment. I walked in this little house in Los Llanos, Dominican Republic, in this back bedroom in the dark with nothing. And there was a picture of me and my siblings. I turned to Rykar and I was like, why is Tam, Mike, Jackie, and me in this lady's house? Like, we were giggling. And Rykar was like, yeah, it's just Ramona. You know, it was just so cute. They loved him. Anyway, so that's why we knew we had to go see Ramona and tell her that Rykar had passed away. So anyway, we pulled in and she was so excited to see us. She remembered me and we had the whole family, but she kept thinking that Rykar was going to jump from a tree. The missionaries were there to interpret for us. And so we were talking, and finally the missionary said, she keeps asking where Rykar is. She thinks he's going to jump out from a tree or from around the corner. And I was like, oh my gosh. So we were just, kind of gearing up to tell her. So anyway, we told her, and it was really sweet. We just cried, and it was the sweetest moment. And then we got talking, and I said, okay, no, wait, where is your daughter, the one that was pregnant? And she said she had passed away. Her daughter had been sick and had passed away. And we both, our family went, of course, there's someone that's dead, because there always is. There's always these crazy moments. And I said, she passed away. So then we cried. Her and I went in this little room, mother to mother, and we had a moment there. And Rykar was hanging on our wall, which was, I'm like, oh, and there's Rykar. It was funny. And then all of a sudden I was in that room with her, and we came out, and I said, so where's her kids? And she said, well, this is Roy, and then this is Rykar. And she had been pregnant and named their child Rykar. And so there was 15-year-old Rykar. And these poor missionaries are like, you named your kid? This is right. So it was just the most coolest full circle moment.
So Ramona's daughter that passed away named her son
Rykar. Probably 4 months after, a year after Rykar left, or 9 months after Rykar left his mission. But I would have never known that.
Yeah.
Like, we would have never known that there was just this cute kid named Rykar after our boy. Mm-hmm. And actually, since then, I mean, if you want me to toot his horn, he's had a lot of kids named after him.
Really?
Robbie, yeah. Robbie, his companion from Farmington, named his little boy. And I had one of my cousins call me and meet a family at reception. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm so emotional. Anyway, she texted me and she said, you need to call or text this guy named Brady. He was in Rykar's mission, and he had actually named his 2 kids Hazen and Rykar.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of weird.
But if that doesn't tell you the impact of Rykar, and it's like everyone is going to talk up someone that has passed away.
I know.
But Rykar is serious. It was just a different level of how Christ-like he was to be on that one-on-one basis. Where how many kids did you just name?
I know.
Like,
I really think we have probably 6 kids that we didn't know had been named after him. It was just very weird. Yeah. I feel like I should do an hour on his bad stuff, because there's bad stuff, but you don't do that after they're gone. But I'm being serious. He was a different kid, and that part was kind of cool. But Rykar's a cool name.
Rykar is a cool name. You did good on that one, for sure.
But I mean, it is true. Yeah. That one was really cute for me. That how random that Bruce's cousin was at a wedding reception and met this person. It was so it was just crazy. And then she said, you need to call he's a doctor in Salt Lake. And so I messaged him. It was crazy. And he had named both of his little boys Hazen and Rykar. That's pretty cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, my only thing I would say is just for people, I don't give advice on grief. I don't like when people do that, because it is so, so personal. But the only other thing I would say is to hang on if you're brand new in grief, because the waves come with no warning, and they are intense. And I do say that they soften, that you don't, I kept hearing that I wouldn't feel like this forever, but in my head I thought, how am I going to feel like this? But they soften, and they still come. I had a really bad one last week, and I couldn't believe it. They still come, but the intensity will soften.
Yeah. Well, Jody, I freaking love you a lot, and I think the inspiration that you have brought to so many people through your teaching and through Rykar, it's really a great example to everyone that we can get through really hard things, and we can help other people along the way, and when we feel like it or not. I mean, what you guys have done was such a horrific experience, and she was a little humble about her stuff in Dominican Republic, but they've been doing a lot of good there, and really, you guys are lights to the world, and that's why in the intro it's like Jody is a light to the world.
So sweet.
So we're gonna have a part 2 of this. She also went through a crazy cancer journey a year later, and we will talk about that. Yeah. But thank you everyone for listening, and we love you. And I want to ask you one question. What is a question that you want to ask everyone to think about?
What is a question that I would want everyone to think about? Gosh, this is on the spot. I have to think for a minute. Jaxon, I got to think for a second here. What is a question that I want to ask everyone that's listening? Maybe what experience have you had in your life that has changed you for the better? And call me up and share it with me.
There we go.
Because grief brings connection. And I guess that would be what have you gone through? Because I do feel like everyone has a story, especially if you're old like me.
Yeah.
And lots of young kids have stories. We don't tell them enough, so I think this is an amazing format to do that.
Awesome. And where can they find you? How can they reach out to you?
One Soul Charity on Instagram and Facebook. We haven't done much with it because of everything else that's been going on, but we keep saying we're going to pick back up and do some things. One Soul Charity, or Jody Hazen, Joe Hazen. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook too. But those are the only places.
Perfect.
We're not very famous. We're not trying to be famous. We're trying to survive.
Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on today, and we will talk soon. And that's what we have for the Life Legacy podcast today. And remember to inspire those around you and be a light to change people's lives. And your worth is worth more than what you think. And we love you. And that is a podcast.